Hi, my name is Ryan Sais, and I'm 45 years old, and I served 4 years in the only service that really matters, which is the United States Marine Corps, from 1994 to 1998. So I was part of a detachment that was in Special Forces. Basically what we did is we did counterterrorism tactics and training. There was a broad scope of what we actually did initially as part of this B billet is what they call it. I was part of a detachment in Honolulu, Hawaii, and we basically guarded SIMPAC fleet, which is the Pacific Fleet. We basically guarded all of their secret compartmented information, and we protected that. We escorted vice admirals around. It was a pretty cool deal. We were constantly on guard, and it was a cool time to be part of that process. Also in that time frame, I went to Bangor, Washington, where we were part of the START program. So for some of the younger people, that's their strategic arms reduction treaty. And basically what that was is the tail end of the Cold War, the Russians and the Americans had an agreement to reduce their nuclear warheads and only produce a certain amount. Basically it was our job to guard those national assets in Washington and make sure that there was no terrorism part going there. We escorted subs out from the water into exclusion, and the Russians would come inspect our weapons, we would come and inspect their weapons. So yeah, it was a pretty stressful time. Then finally I went to Quantico, Virginia, which is the crossroads of the Marine Corps. And basically what I did there is I taught officer candidates and graduated officers in counterterrorism and survival tactics as an enlisted instructor. We basically taught them how to lead Marines and to not get those Marines killed, and to learn how to survive if they are captured, and what to do and what the appropriate measures are to make sure that you're not captured. So that was what I did while I was in the Marine Corps, and it was a time well served, and sometimes I actually miss it. Yeah, a service-related memory that I have is I remember the Russians had come to Bangor, and we were actually in a Condition 1 process, which is basically a round in the chamber with sights on somebody while they're inspecting weapons. We already had been in the wire for 7 consecutive days, and when I say the wire, it's basically an exclusion area that looks like a prison pretty much, except for there's nuclear assets there instead of criminals, and we're pretty much cut off from the world. We got no phone calls, we really got no communication, there's no email because of the security implications there. And the Russians came on our last day, so we had to stay in the wire for another 7 days, so that was 2 weeks. And if you can imagine a whole platoon being in there for 2 weeks with really nothing to do but PT, which is physical training and running and sleeping and pretty much cussing out these Russians, then you could understand why you were on edge. But basically, my wife was pregnant at that time with our first child, and I remember being locked in on a Russian person when the duty officer came up and informed me that my son was coming. So I was able to leave the wire and make sure that my wife had all the support she needed while our son was born. So that was a pretty cool memory, right in the middle of a pretty stressful time to pretty much one of the most happiest times of my life. Another memory I have is an introduction to the Marine Corps right after boot camp. We were in our Special Battalion's weapons training, and I actually was on a 50-mile hump, and there was a gunnery sergeant. And if anybody's in the military, they know that gunnery sergeants are kind of hardcore. And my first real actual Marine Corps experience was him drinking coffee and chewing and actually throwing up on the hump of 50 miles and not even stopping. And then I knew that I was that I needed to adjust my attitude and my focus, because it isn't really that bad. And it was just an eye-opening experience for me. So there's a lot more, but those are two that really stick out in my mind.